we get some fun stuff to talk about. And as you can see by the table, we are prepared. We brought out absolutely everything jerkbaits and jigs related to cover not only current conditions for late summer fishing, but also going into that kind of fall transition, which, I was thinking about it as I was making the video, getting ready, getting the title, and I was like, is it too early to be talking about that? No, it's New England, and September starts this weekend. So no, it's not too early to start talking about the fall transition. It is literally right around the corner. So let's get into the topic at hand, which is...
What's the question?
So his question, I have it. We want to know, what is your favorite color is lost about me. I'm assuming you're asking favorite color about both jerkbait and jig. We will cover that. That is going to be a big focal point of what we're going to discuss for not only, as the title implies, from that late summer pattern and then going into the fall transition. Because in my opinion, this is coming into the fall. I find that those windows of their color preference shift pretty hard, and they're much more narrow. So you really got to be on top of your game for being open-minded and trying a bunch of different colors. So let's talk about what the hell is happening right now.
I mean, you got like 76 freaking jerkbaits out here. Might as well talk about it.
We have bases covered. We talk a lot about mega bass, and I know not everybody can go out and buy a ton of $25 jerkbaits. So I made it a point, and so did Dennis, to bring out non-mega bass jerkbaits, even though they are inferior. No, there's actually a lot of non-mega bass jerkbaits that are phenomenal, especially this time of the year. Mega bass really proves its value very early in the spring when you want something to truly suspend, like consistently, no tinkering with it. Right now, this time of the year where the water's still a little bit warmer, you have a lot more leeway in what you can do and what brands and models will work for you. So that's why we really wanted to kind of show a whole bunch of different options. Primary focus, though, is color. At least for me, from my perspective. I don't play around with depth too much. I want you guys to lead the conversation for right now, late summer, your go-to jerkbaits and why.
So somebody asked last week when we were figuring out what to do this week, like what the difference is between fishing a jerkbait in the spring and fishing a jerkbait in the fall. And color is a huge part of it. Depth can be a huge part of it. Basically, right now, the fish, at some point, once you start getting the cold nights, the fish school up and they really get on bait fish. And that is the biggest difference between now and in the spring. In the spring, they're eating bait fish too, but they're also eating crawfish and some other stuff, bugs and stuff like that are in the water. Now is the time of year where they go where the bait fish go. So if the bait fish are in a foot of water, they'll go in a foot of water. If the bait fish are in 50 feet of water, they're going to go in 50 feet of water. The reason why color is so important is that those fish this time of year get so keyed in on bait fish that they really don't want anything that doesn't look like what they're eating. That kind of goes against like what I would say if I was talking about this in the spring, because in the spring, you saw my jerkbait boxes. I have like entire sections of the box that are filled with clown color. Like clown color is my favorite jerkbait color because I like to trigger bites. I do not really use things like that this time of year in the fall, because this time of year, I'm not necessarily, one, you don't really need to do it. Like in the spring, you're trying to, or at least I'm trying to trigger a fish into biting.
You really need to entice them to
right,
bite.
exactly. I'm trying to like force something to bite when it doesn't really want to bite.
Is that clown color?
Yeah, that's clown color. It's an ugly one, but it is
Well,
one.
whatever. They're sacrificial ones for Champlain with pike. I can get up.
But so in the spring, that's kind of what you want to think about is you're trying to get a fish that doesn't really want to bite because you're in March and the water is 39 degrees or whatever. In the fall, those fish want to bite. They're there because they're biting. They're with those bait fish because they're eating those bait fish. So you want to use something that looks like those bait fish. And if you get something that looks like those bait fish, you do not need to trigger them. They will bite. So
Give me a good example and show up.
Depending on where you are. So that's a good one.
This is so scientifically high tech.
So you'll see with all these colors that there's really nothing crazy about them. They're natural. They look like perch or they look like shad, or in our case up here, alewife or smelt.
Golden shiners.
Right, golden shiners. They look like what the bait fish are here. There's nothing crazy about any of these. So I think that is the biggest difference. The other thing that I would say, there you go, perch.
How are we not going to talk about the perch?
The other thing that I would say is that this time of year there's a lot of small bait fish because when bass spawn or when all fish spawn, it's usually in the spring. Those fish are born. Those perch, exactly. Those fish now are very small.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but they're called young of the year.
Young of the year. Young of the year. Year of the young.
Year of the young was what I called it the first time because I am dumb.
That's true. But I would say there is a time point later in the year, probably as you get closer to ice in, where those bigger baits come into play again. And we saw that last year, and we're talking about that before or 2 years ago. But for the most part, for most of the fall, I'm typically going baitfish color. I'm typically leaning towards smaller sized jerk baits, things that match the size as closely as possible of what the fish are eating. Yeah, I think that's it. Andrew.
What am I going to say?
Jerk baits.
Jerk baits.
You know what you can do to expand upon that too, which I know you can speak to very well because you really like trying a bunch of different things, is different brands, different models, and then go into Cadence.
Yeah. In the fall, they're just feeding like crazy. They're chasing around bait, and that's why I like to pick up.
I think he means this one.
This one. This is a bigger Vision 110 LBO. I like to throw that or just a regular Vision 110 or the Berkeley Cutter 90. The Berkeley Cutter 90 specifically because it floats and you got to work it fast to keep it down. It doesn't really suspend that great. In the fall, I've had really good success with like practically not even stopping the twitch. Consistent, like maybe 8 to 10 twitches, pause for about a second or two, and then continue that.
Yep, I agree. I think that also has to do with the fact that, like what I said, the fish want to eat now. Right. They're there because they're eating. They're with the bait fish because they're eating them. Mm-hmm. So you don't really need to convince them. Right.
They see it and they're like, oh, okay, I want to eat that. You just have to get the right color to be able to actually get that bite to really fire off. You'll still catch fish on other colors, but once you find that right color, then the bite will really start to fire off.
Yep.
So we were talking about that before the show started. As we're sitting here laying out all these, which one did you pick up that you caught the 5 on when we were out there 2 years ago? Okay. So it's a Mega Bass, but...
So this is a Mega Bass Edo Shiner, Galaxy Shiner. The thing to add about this, the reason why we bring that up is if we're talking... So I know that this was intended to be fall transition, but as you go later in fall, things do kind of change. So I brought some of those out just to talk about it since we're talking about jerkbaits in the fall. So everything that I said... and that we said about fishing little small jerkbaits and fishing them really fast earlier in the fall, that all changes as you go into really late fall. As you go into really late fall, what I have experienced, I don't know that this is true, but what I have experienced in my fishing is that it seems like the fish want a larger singular meal rather than eating a bunch of small little things.
Right.
And I feel like there is a certain time where that's when that magical like late fall big bite bait or big bait bite happens again. And you can do the same thing with jerk baits. Like that is when I will go to an Edo Shiner, or I'll go to, this is an OSP, I don't remember, Rudra, I think it's called, or the Mega Bass Kanata, like the really big one. That's when you go to things like that, when the fish are only going to eat once every 3 days or once every week or something like that. But when they eat, they want something big because it has to sustain them for that long.
Side note, you could also throw a glide and work it the same way as a jerkbait.
That's true.
Back to jerkbaits.
That's true. That's true.
No, extremely important point, because when we had Oliver on several times, he brought that up. When it comes to glide fishing, for those that want to get into that, if you have confidence in fishing a jerkbait, you should be able to go out and throw a glide confidently. He made a really good point of that. When he has clients that come out and they want to fish a big glide for the first time, first question he asked, how are you with the jerkbait? And if the answer is not good, then he said, we're going to go out and throw a jerkbait until you feel good about that. And that's literally going to do the same thing with a glide. And it's just a lot easier to get more bites with a jerkbait, makes that transition to a glide a lot easier. So just keep that in mind. You should go back and watch one of those too if you're interested in more big bait fishing stuff. I forget what your last point was, because I didn't want to... I jumped in with that, but it was perfect
we
time
talked
for that.
about catching the 5-pounder on this, and that in the end of the fall you use larger baits.
Yep. So for me right now, if I'm throwing a jerkbait, I go very different, right? For this late summer, the water's still really warm and all those fish are usually out a lot deeper. But right now, again, what we said at the beginning, the majority of them seem to be in that 15 to 25 foot range. So I actually really like throwing Megabass 110+2 or any jerkbait that'll get down like 15, 16 feet without a ton of effort, and throw that confidently on 10 or 12 pound fluoro. And I'll be able to get that down, and it's just a little bit easier for those fish that are sitting down closer to the bottom and 25, 20 feet to come up and get it. Smallmouth are very opportunistic. I mean, even when you're Damiki fishing this time of the year, and especially we'll say the end of September, going into really that fall transition, I've caught tons of fish where I've dropped that bait down only 25 feet, and those fish have come up from 55 to hit that. And sometimes it only gets down 10 feet, and those fish are already coming up. And I know guys that are out there catching smallmouth on top water over the top of like 65 and 70 feet of water. And those fish are probably down 35, 40 feet in a lot of cases. So you don't have to always get it down that deep, but the way I view it, it's a little bit easier when you're fishing out like truly deep water, like a glacial lake, for example. So if I'm confident a jerkbait's going to get bit right now, it's a 1-2 punch. I've got something shallow. If I've got confidence that up, we'll say 15 feet of water or less. But if I'm out there and I'm seeing fish in 25 feet or deeper, then I will go to a 110+2. And I like to feed them a meal. I don't like to go to the smaller sizes. The juniors, like the +1 junior, is also phenomenal bait. And that really goes in hand with what Dennis did say towards into that fall transition, where the young of the year, I got it right that time.
Got it right. Yeah.
Will, really push up, and now you're matching the hatch. It's always come down to it's match the hatch. That's color and size. But right now, it's a mixed bag. Like literally everything we've been catching for the last like 2 or 3 weeks has either been on a really big jig or a teeny tiny little finesse thing, and nothing in between. So I approach my jerkbait fishing the same. As for colors, I'm always going to stick with yellow perch because they're so common. It doesn't matter where you go in the greater Northeast or literally anywhere in the northern half of North America, there are yellow perch. You will always find them, and there are always largemouth and smallmouth eating them. So I will always start with a yellow perch, and I'll bounce between, depending on the conditions, something that's just like a perfectly painted one versus one that's more like transparent and like a ghost kind of pattern. Those are my favorite. And if that doesn't work, then that's where I start going with really vibrant colors. Not so much right now, this late summer, but into that fall transition, that's where the really vibrant colors I've found, not just from my experience, but other people fishing with me or people I've talked to, the vibrant color becomes much more important, and you find much more success with it. It doesn't have to be the whole thing. Like, hopefully you can kind of get the idea of that from back there. I don't even know what color this is from Megabass. Hang on, we can pick it up a different way. But it's got a like nuclear orange belly. It's a gold shiner on the side, and it's got a black back. This is loud the whole way through, but this is a fall killer color. Andrew has caught a stupid amount of fish, and I'll throw it, not with the same level of confidence, but I'll still have success, but nothing like Andrew has had with literally this jerkbait in my hand. Not just this color, but the one I'm holding. But then when you go to something that's subtly more loud, the one I was asking Dennis about, we were talking about prior to the show, it's that kind of bluegilly color pattern. Andrew showed it just a couple minutes ago, but on the belly, there's a subtle orange on the front half, and then this chartreuse on the tail. And we were out fishing a pond. Jerkbait bite was on fire. Andrew and I already been out there 2 weekends in a row, I think, and I forget. I think we caught like 100 fish between those 2 trips. So then Dennis and I go out, and I forget where Andrew was. He couldn't make it out, and we're throwing jerkbaits, and we were having not as good a success. So Dennis picks up that one, and literally the only difference between what he was throwing and what I was throwing was that chartreuse on the back, and he lit them up, and he caught a 5-pounder. And so I went digging through my box, and I found something remotely close. And honestly, I may have just picked up this one, the Eleggy Bone, which, again, is loud. It's got a big chartreuse stripe on the back, translucent in the middle, kind of like a pearlish blue-purple on the top. And that started panning out a lot better than the various yellow perch I was throwing, and then the bluegill, like a very natural bluegill color I was throwing. Like none of those, not even that orange, black, and gold were panning out. But then just going to like something like a chartreuse, that loud, vibrant color on the back made a difference. Not like his did though, because it was just a subtle. It was a little bit. It made all the difference in the world. Major point going into that fall transition. Size does matter. There's going to be a good window where that smaller one is best, as they pointed out, because you want to go after that bait fish they're typically feeding on when they're all kind of push up from the wherever they hide into the shallows, and you'll see them in the morning. Go to launch your boat, look down around the ramp, and you'll see like hundreds of them running. Mm-hmm. Then okay, now's a good time to be throwing something of that pattern. also key you in on where you should be looking for fish, and that kind of should point you in the right direction for what size and maybe color you should be throwing. But then that bite's going to kind of disappear a little bit. Then they're going to want a meal, and that's towards, you know, after fall transition. Now we're really getting into that fall pattern.
I think that point too is when the color comes back. I think when they are chasing the little tiny bait fish is when, at least for me, that's when I throw natural colors that look like the little tiny bait fish. In the fall, late fall, like when we went out and we were catching those fish,
Yep.
That's when I think it's more like early spring, where I'm like, I want to make one fish bite. So I'm going to use something that I think will trigger that fish to bite.
Yeah, and that's where the loud color comes in handy. Even the little subtle, subtle loudness.
subtle.
Little subtle.
Just a little subtle.
Just a wee bit subtle.
That's what I'm missing from my jerkbait collection, where I don't have color patterns like that. Yeah, I have something with a combination of all those colors, but I don't have something where it's subtle in those changes from one color to the next, which is just a little bit different than, you know, like everything else I have jerkbaits is very run of the mill. You know, it's all standard stuff you can find pretty much anywhere that everybody's always going to stock. Those are not so easy to find colors that not very common. That's what I need to, you know, continue to supplement my jerkbait collection with. I didn't talk about Cadence, but you guys did.
I think that in the fall, it all depends on the mood of the fish. Like I am wholeheartedly convinced, and this is like the 10th time I've said it, that in the fall they want to eat this time of year. So you don't have to do anything too crazy. Like when we were out that day and I caught the 5-pounder, and like as you get out in the water, it gets back down into the 40s and into the low 40s and maybe the high 30s. That's when you have to start doing weird things with your cadence and like really long pauses, and then like double tapping it or triple tapping it or something like that, and trying to get one that's looking at it to just like and bite it. That's when I get back into like my early spring cadence of using weird colors and crazy cadence to try to like force something to bite that doesn't really want to bite.
Yep. The only thing I can say to potentially add to that, especially coming from someone like me, again, where for the longest time I could not find the level of confidence in jerkbait that I had in like everything else. In the fall, I find it easier and a little more consistent that you could literally just 1-2, pause, 1-2. And more often than not, you will still be successful just using that tempo. But I really like Sean Place's comment, which is why I left it up on the screen there for a second. There's a bunch of others we got to get back through. But in the spring, I put on headphones and go off the beat with pauses. That's actually a great idea. I really like that. Otherwise, I don't like music at all, but I could find that being extremely helpful for someone trying to find their confidence in.
Caitlin had a day, my wife, where she absolutely destroyed me fishing a jerkbait on Champlain, and I was like, "What are you doing?" And she was like, "I'm jerking it to Yankee Doodle." I was like, I hate that so much. Like
Yankee Doodle, like that.
I hate it.
That's awesome.
Chris Curtis, we can finally answer yours. We want to know what your favorite color is. Dude, yellow perch for me, and GP Pro Perch, very specifically from Megabass. It is hands down one of my favorite colors, and I think that's that kind of ghosty one. If not, then that ghost version of the GP Pro Perch. I can't get enough of it. It's phenomenal. It works freaking everywhere. Andrew can attest to it. Like, I literally tie it on first time we go anywhere with it, except for like very early in the year. Then I typically go with like a black blue. The GP Pro Blue would be my second favorite color. Third behind that, Jackal Squad Minnow 95. And I can't remember what it's called, but it's a very, very good imitation of smelt, which have been kind of hard to find this year. But this is one of my first jerkbaits that I ever bought. Lucky Craft, the SP Pointer 100, makes something very similar. It's just a more slender profile than this one. Almost identical in the color scheme. That's my third favorite color. Those are really, really good, and you don't have to get a Megabass one. So Lucky Craft ain't cheap, but it's not expensive like Megabass.
My number one favorite color is Western Clown in Megabass. I've caught multiple 8-pound largemouth on that, so you can't argue with Western Clown. I would say if I'm on Champlain and I know that the fish are eating alewives, then the best alewife color that I have ever found is a Lucky Craft Pointer 100 in American Shad. It looks exactly like an alewife in every way. I think those are probably my two.
Mine, pretty much anything that looks like a golden shiner, white perch, or really any sort of bait fish. I mean, it just goes hand in hand, bait fish and bass eating. So
I don't remember what color it is that you're holding there, the Megabass one. My favorite thing
But
about that,
it looks like a golden shiner, white perch.
It's they have a lot
smelt
of
like
yeah, they have a lot of
It
colors that
just
are the same.
looks
But that's like
a bait fish.
it's like the same as this.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
it
so this
literally
it's Tennessee shad. That might be like Wakasagi or something. But
yes, that's exactly what it is.
yeah, they have a lot of similar ones that kind of has the back that almost looks like a yellow perch, but it also kind of looks like a golden shiner. But it also, if you look, it has that little hint of chartreuse right there.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's what I like about that, because like as you just said, it can pass for a multitude of different bait fish that are close enough. So that's what I like about that one.
Yeah.
Sean Place, have you tried the Megabass Katana?
Oh, but I want
Kanata,
to.
yeah.
Kanata.
Yes, they're very good. Yes, I have a few of them. That is a late fall when we were talking about when you go to bigger baits. That is very good in late fall. You can use it all year, obviously, but that's like a big thing in late fall and early spring.
So I don't have any, and you're telling me I'm gonna have to buy some. I don't have a problem with this.
Yeah, you should do that.
Sure.
There's
Yeah.
actually-
Yeah.
Okay. Andrew Santiago, I like Lucky Craft. Lucky Craft was when I first got into jerkbait fishing. That's what I started filling my tackle box with, was Lucky Craft. At the time, they were $15 each. Now I think most of them are like $18 last I looked. Last I bought one, it's been a little while. Lucky Craft is phenomenal. The only knock I have against them is their color options are kind of limited, and like their yellow perch. Again, the last time I bought one was probably 2 years ago. I hate their yellow perch. I just can't buy it. As much as I love their jerkbaits, I just cannot buy their yellow perch. It's awful. If they've got a better one since then I should probably look into it. I just haven't needed to replace anything yellow perch like that, and I love the Megabass Vision 110 perches, so I kind of don't want to look at anybody else. Jackal Re-Range makes a good one. Actually, I did pull out a Strike King, one of the KVD Strike Kings. That's also phenomenal yellow perch. It's kind of hard to see from back there, but that's a very, very good representation of a northern yellow perch.
The bait is also just different. Like it drops some jerkbait lip knowledge.
This was a jerkbait stream.
Yeah, you're not gonna have time for jigs.
Anyway, no,
And also, we like jigs. But like
the jigs are gonna take another half an hour.
the lip on a Lucky Craft, it's like thick, hard plastic. It does not move. So when you jerk a Lucky Craft, it has really wide action. Whereas if you look at a regular Vision 110, the lip is very, very thin, and it almost is thin to the point that it will flex a little bit when you go to twitch it, and that'll give it a lot more subtle action. So like so you can see how thick the lip is on that. So if you look at the Lucky Craft, that lip is not going to flex at all when you go to jerk it, and that means that the bait is going to move instead of the lip moving. But if you look at the Vision 110, the lip is super, super subtle and super narrow, and that lip will actually move a little bit when you go to jerk it, and it kind of absorbs some of that movement, and it makes the bait move a lot more subtly. So if you move a Vision 110 too hard, it'll just roll over and flip on its side, and it won't really look right. Where you can't really do that with a Lucky Craft. But there are certain times where you need to move subtly, and certain times where you need to move it really erratically.
Justin, on calm days, fishing shallow or on highly pressured lakes, have you guys tried a silent model jerkbait?
Yeah, it's the same thing as a crankbait. You got to play with how subtle or how much noise you're making and how much flash you have. So I would say that isn't the first thing that I would change. The first thing I would change would be how flashy the jerkbait is. But that is definitely something. If it's very quiet, you can go to something that's silent, and it can help.
Yeah, so this is actually a really good one. This is going to take quite a few minutes here. Gear, rod, reel, line. Wow, boy, what the hell am I using? The only loose rod that I have left that I'm still using, aside from two of my Super Duty rods, is Custom Pro Speed Sticks. And at the time, 3 years ago, it was like that was their top of the line rod. They're great. I love them. It's a full cork. It is a 7-foot medium, moderate fast. It's definitely light. It's supple. But for anything that's like a 110+1 or smaller, lighter, it's great. I mean, I can bomb a 110 on that. And that is paired with a the Tournament Pro Baitcast reel, 6.3-1. And then for my line, Defiant, soft casting, 9.6 pound fluoro. Right now, if I'm throwing any of the 110+1, I'm going to go over about 10 pound fluorocarbon. If I'm going to the 110+2, I might upsize to the 12 pound. Something really, really close to that. Either side of it, 11 to 13 pounds, and then we'll say 8 to 11 pound for the smaller jerk baits. But you know, the big thing is having that moderate fast, moderate to moderate fast action on the rod, where it's got like the full sweep of parabolic bed in it. So you literally just kind of twisted the hips to load up on those, especially the Megabass hooks where they're so tiny. It doesn't take much to rip them out. You want something that has a lot of give. And even with the drag back down, you still need everything to help you out, especially, I know I've caught a couple of big largemouth and especially big smallmouth where I had 1 point of one treble hook in. And because I had my drag right and, such a good soft, supple rod, never lost those fish, even though I had one hook point in them. So it all kind of plays in together.
What gear ratio do you like?
6.3 to 1. Yeah, no, it's
pretty much covered the whole thing. What would your ratio be?
I use 7 to 1 because
7 to 1?
when you're with a jerkbait, you're not moving the bait with the reel. So
No.
I want one. For me, I want one that's faster so that when one does bite it, and if it runs toward me, I can pick up the slack really quick.
I use the Lewis Hyper Mag 8.5 to 1 because
Makes
why
sense.
the hell not?
It makes sense.
The faster the better, I feel, with jerkbaits.
Makes sense.
There is one thing I forgot to mention. I talked about having 2 rods for the whole range, and I only talked about 1 rod. The other one is the Douglas X Matrix 704M. 7-foot medium moderate rod. I friggin' love that. It's not quite as soft as that luge rod that I have, and that's where I really like it, especially for cranking. If I'm throwing like a KVD 2.5 or any crankbait that dives down to 8 feet or deeper, something that's got a little bit more weight behind it, I got a lot more confidence hucking it with that rod where it's got just a teensy bit more backbone. But then especially for the 110+2, like I was much more confident throwing it on that rod than it was my luge rod. And it's just kind of all balance with the 110 and 110+1 on that luge rod. You go to load it up to bomb it for 150+ foot cast, and it just feels right the whole way through. You do that same rod on a 110+2, and it just doesn't feel like safe. And I go to that Douglas X Matrix 704M, and it's just like that 110+2, just load it up and bomb the thing, and it just feels perfectly balanced and not, no danger of being overloaded at any point throughout that whole cast. Seacoast Angler, any good smelt colored jerk baits?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, tons of them.
Yeah. My favorite one is Matte Shad. Megabass Matte Shad is really, really good, especially if it's any sort of windy or cloudy or overcast. In a little bit sunnier conditions, then my favorite color is OSP makes it. It's called Ghost Minnow. It's very clear. The ones that I use actually don't have blue. Like the smelt that, at least the smelt on like Winnipesaukee, the ones that I've seen them cough up, I know that they do look blue sometimes in the water, but like they're usually like Ghost Minnow colored almost. So I try to stick with those.
I think that's what it is. Blue Pearl Shad.
Awesome.
But that'd be the Jackal Re-Range. That's a really good one. There's another one from Lucky Craft, and it might be their Ito Shiner. It's not the Arkansas Shiner. It's not the one that has yellow on it. And then there's that one from Megabass that you're holding down there.
Yeah,
What's the Wakasagi?
Yeah.
That, anything like that, like kind of translucent, but like a little darker in the translucency with black back. Like perfect. Anything you can find like that, phenomenal. Andrew had color for smallmouth and color for largemouth. Favorite color for smallmouth?
Pretty much anything smelt, or I hate to say it, perch, even though I never throw it.
But unless I'm out fishing him, but when I'm knocking on the door of being about 10 fish ahead of him, then the yellow perch gets tied on.
It does. It does. That and
Which is rare.
largemouth is that Wakasagi. I love that color. Or really anything that looks like white perch or golden shiner. Those are pretty much my favorite colors for largemouth.
Mm-hmm.
You?
Western Clown for both.
For both?
I've caught many 6-pound smallmouth on it, and I've caught several 8-pound largemouth on it. I do also, specifically for largemouth, I do also like the Wakasagi color that Andrew's looking at, or Tennessee Shad. They're basically the same color, but for largemouth, those are really good too. But Western Clown is always where I start, pretty much.
For me, largemouth first, yellow perch. Yellow perch and GP Pro, which I think it's the GP Pro Blue 2. That blue in colder water, darker stained water, that is my best color. And right behind it in those same conditions, anything yellow perch, but especially that kind of ghosty yellow perch. And then for smallmouth, I'm going to say the Wakasagi or Elegee Bone. Either one of those, like, you can't go wrong. If I had to pick two, one for each of those, I would go yellow perch and I would go Elegee Bone. Because the Elegee Bone, like really stained water, any time of the year excels. in really clear water when you're trying to fire them up, largemouth or smallmouth, doesn't matter. It excels. There's something about that color that just works really, really well no matter where you go. And Kevin, do you use the sweeping motion on the +2? Straight reel and twitch don't really go that deep for me.
I think might be working it down.
I think he's been getting it down. Yeah, you should reel it down to the depth and then you fish it like a
The
jerkbait.
slower you reel it, the faster it goes down.
Yeah, reel it really slow to get it down to depth and then fish it like a jerkbait.
I
It'll
find I have
still
to do
go
the same thing with
deeper.
the +1.
Yeah.
Where you got to start reeling it really slowly a little bit, and that kind of levels it out and gets it nose down and tracking that way. And it's usually like 5 or 6, turns on the handle, and then I can just kind of lightly twitch, and that gets a really nice cutting dance out of it. That's not like really extravagant. Dan Nickerson, another one. What is the difference between +1 and +2?
Depth. One of them goes down. I think the +1 goes down like 9 feet to 10 feet around that, and the +2 will go down to almost 15 feet, maybe 16, depending on your line.
If you're daring enough to throw it on an 8-pound, you can get it down 16 to 18 feet from what a few friends have told me. But
8 pounds plenty.
for you, I'm scared.
I was thinking
It's the cast that makes me nervous.
you do cast crazy. Yeah.
With lighter line, all you really got to do is flick it.
Yeah.
It's not
I
like
like
a
casting
full blown-
far.
You cast far with 8-pound line, no matter what.
I know. All right. Thank you all for being here tonight. There's nothing else we could or should be able to elaborate on. That was awesome. You guys did phenomenal. Good job.
Good job, Andrew.
Thanks. Good job, Dennis.
You guys did awesome because you brought a ton of awesome questions for us. Chat engagement was amazing tonight. Loved it. That's what we'd like to see. More than anything, hope that was very, very helpful for everybody. If you haven't done so before you go, please leave a like. Aside from that, I think that's everything.
We
you
will
think?
see you guys next week, as always, for my last week.
Oh,
Take notes. You're taking over on this.
I'm just gonna say bye.
That's what I always do. I start. See ya. We'll see you guys next week, as always, at youtube.com/@ReelNorthernBass at 8 p.m. Eastern every week. See you later. Have a good night.